call the meeting to order at 6:44, and this is a meeting of the Agricultural Advisory Committee. Just because we have a new member here, let's just run around the table again. So my name is Christopher Monroe, and I'm the delegate from the Planning Board.
I'm Kathy Hanskate. I'm a at-large member and a farmer in town.
Brian Cagle, I'm also an at-large member, and sorry I haven't been here for the last few. It just was a series of unfortunate events, but
No problem.
glad to finally be here now, most from Wachusett Vineyards.
Mark Kresge, at-large, also on the Open Space Committee.
Keith Tatro, Ag Committee and Plainview Farm.
Katie Young, Select Board.
Alright, so I guess while we're opening the meeting, do you have any questions about anything we've worked on in the last couple of meetings? Were you able to?
Probably. I did try to catch up. I watched the YouTube video from last week's meeting and tried to read over the notes and such as best I could, but I guess we'll see how it goes.
Okay. Well, if you have any questions,
Okay,
or
thanks.
if there's anything you want us to pause and talk about, just let us know. And
Okay.
we're obviously a public committee, so we have to follow all of those rules, but for the
Mhm.
most part, we're pretty informal.
Yeah.
So next down the agenda is the acceptance of the minutes. So everybody should have in their packet the minutes from our meeting on the 20th. Please take a quick moment if you haven't already. And does anybody have any questions or comments or corrections on the minutes?
Looks good.
Alright, take a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes of April 20th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? They are unanimously accepted. So next on the agenda is open session and call for public comment. I do not see any members of the public present. Does anybody have anything that is not on the agenda that they would like to add to the open session? We'll come back around later in the meeting too, if anything comes up. Alright, so updates on old business and action items. So one of my action items at the last meeting was to reach out to the planning board and to MRPC. The planning board has not met yet since then, and because of where the MRPC meeting falls, they're actually not meeting until the 12th. I don't think that has any impact on what we're currently working on, because no matter what planning tool we use, we still need the same guts. We're still gonna have to have the list of uses, we're still gonna have to know what kinds of properties we want are included, no matter what way we end up going, so. I don't see that really impacting us or our timeline that we're on, but it will be nice to hear from the rest of my colleagues. I did reach out to MRPC, and the email I sent them is attached to this. There were essentially two questions that I asked them. The first question is, do they have any list of working properties like Central Mass Planning keeps for its towns? And they don't, is the answer in one of the emails that you'll see attached. Although they did give us back the methodology that CMPRC, lots of letters, used for coming up with their working properties list. And the other question that I asked them was if doing this as an overlay made sense. There wasn't any bright line guidance on that. They didn't say it, they essentially said it doesn't not make sense. But
Nice.
but nobody locally has done it. And honestly, I don't find that to be too surprising because we're pretty early in the water here.
Mm-hmm.
There are only a couple towns that have done it. There are some towns that have made some more general zoning changes. I found another document that listed some of the other towns, but none of them had done the agricultural accessory bylaw. They just done some tweaks and such to the zoning, and one set up, they set up a district. It was a district that they just allowed a bunch of other uses in that they thought would be handy as accessory uses. So, everybody should take a look at those messages, cause there is some stuff and information. Does anybody have any questions or anything they wanna talk about out of those at the moment?
Yeah, on the methodology, I do have the assessor's database if we decide that we wanna go in that direction for some reason,
Okay.
to analyze use codes.
Do you think it will be useful, even if it's not useful for what we do here, useful for when we present to the town? Or present to the select board and the planning board, and then subsequently, when there's public hearings and info sessions and all of that good stuff?
I tend to think not, but let me look at some particular properties, and see how they're coded out in the
Okay.
assessor's database. And see if we can, we're likely to come up with anything, definitive from that approach or not.
Okay. Yeah, and that, that's kind of my sense, that we might not find anything that's truly definitive in it, so. Yeah, it's the, and they kind of talk about that, in the response, short of driving around town to look at other landscapes. Maybe it comes to that at some point. I don't think it needs to right now, though. Any other questions or thoughts about it? I didn't have a chance to pull the Bristol, Rhode Island one that they had mentioned. Any other questions? I'll give everybody one minute to finish up.
I like Jennifer recommending that you touch base with the planning board and
Yes.
the economic development committee, cause they're working on something like this.
Yeah, yeah. She, I think she was actually at the planning board meeting. When-
She was at the EDC meeting when we talked about this.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
thought she was also at the joint select board planning board meeting when we established this committee.
I don't remember if she was, I don't think she was at that one, no, cause the only time I think I ever met her was at EDC,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, the EDC meetings, but yeah, she was, I was just like, wow. Yeah, details.
Yeah. They have a lot going on.
Yeah, it's like, it's probably all a blur, all these towns and meetings that they go to, you know, cause they just come and answer questions, you know, that's what their goal is.
Oh, I guess the other thing that that comes up in that, and it's in the email from Jennifer, is there could be an opportunity for technical assistance, or grant funding if we thought we needed assistance with working on this. So I wanted to throw that out and see what
If
everything.
there is, it's gonna be beyond the scope of this committee, if
Yeah.
we're on the timeline that we were originally talking about.
Yeah, I think so too. Those don't tend to happen particularly quickly.
Yeah.
Alright, so if there's no other questions or comments, let's move forward on the agenda, because now we're getting into the good stuff. So, item 5, develop a draft list of allowable uses. So there is this list that's in the document here, and Mark had grabbed this information for us to give us a discussion place and get us started. What you see in the column on the left is the existing Hubbardston zoning for the residential agricultural district. And then what you see in the column on the right, well, I'll let Mark talk about the source, but it appears to me it's a lot of what was in Rutland.
It's largely from Rutland, a couple other things that pop up in other ones.
So I guess from here, and just to, I guess, back up to make sure we're all on the same page. So this part we're talking about here are going to be the specific activities that fall into 2 buckets. One of them is going to be by right, and then the other one let's just call by permission, because we need to have a discussion down the road on what that permission process looks like, and I don't want to get into any of that tonight. So I think for tonight, let's just talk about them in terms of those two things, by right and by permission. And obviously by right means, well, you can do it, subject to any insurance or other permitting or license requirements. And then by review or by permission, there's a couple ways that could happen: site plan review, special permit. Let's save that discussion for later, and just look at it as a higher level for more intense things that are more likely to impact the community around where it's going on. That's how I would choose to look at that. Does anybody have any thoughts different from that, or?
No, I just have a question on what one of these means.
Okay, well, I'm gonna run down the list,
Yeah,
so.
that's, no, yeah, I'm like already reading. Sorry.
So just for the benefit of the recording, because I believe it is happening, what we currently have for existing uses by right in that district, which is the residential agricultural district, which if you look at that map on the wall there, is all of the green, which is pretty much the entire town, except for that stretch along 68. Religious, sectarian church, the conservation, open space, recreation, agriculture, horticulture, etc., nursery, orchard, sale of farm, nursery, or orchard products which have been produced on premise, accessory uses on the same lot, such as garages, stables, barns, tool sheds, farm buildings, enclosures, tennis courts, swimming pools, cemetery, public and private, non-profit educational museums, municipal uses, home occupation, guest houses, bed and breakfast, educational uses, in-law apartments, solar installations, and then in the currently existing by review special permit, library, healthcare facility, government building facility, public utility facility, country club, that can be complicated, commercial greenhouse, radio, TV towers, nursing, convalescent, rest homes, daycare centers, additions and or alterations to existing non-conforming structure or use, kennel for 5 dogs or more, commercial riding stable, and outdoor marijuana cultivation. So that I just read in that one shot to get into the record. The rest of this I'd like to go down one by one and to ask if anybody else has ideas or other things that they think should come in, or if they see anything here that they think we really need to pause on and have a debate about. So let's start. So fruit, pumpkin, or related U-pick operations. Anybody have any strong feelings against that? Corn mazes, crop art, or related activities. Educational and demonstrative tours. Walking and bicycle tours and trails. Petting and feeding zoos.
That category could probably be expanded out further than just those 2 activities, but the general idea is sound.
So the petting, let's pause and discuss this. So the petting and feeding zoos.
No, I'm talking about walking and bicycling.
Oh, the walking and bicycle
I mean,
trails?
it could include skiing, it could include
Yeah.
riding.
Yeah,
Cross-country skiing,
I agree. Could include skiing and bridle. Any other types of trails we should be including there other than skiing, bridle, bicycling, walking?
I mean, we might come up with some kind of catch-all language.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's more stuff than just those 2.
Yeah, I mean, whenever possible, it's always good to use general language that encompasses everything that you.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, it can cut both ways.
Do we have an idea what that language could look like?
Well, somehow you have to make the distinction, like, does that include motorized vehicles like ATVs, or doesn't it?
Right, I mean, I would.
That's where it starts to get dicey.
Yeah, no,
Or
I would,
even
I would go for some kind of general language that said,
non-motorized.
any non-motorized recreational trail activity or
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
non-motorized outdoor recreational trail use or something like, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause you have motorized as in like ATVs and stuff, but then you also have things that are kind of motorized, like those Segway things that are taking off like crazy, and you can do little.
E-bikes.
Yeah.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
there's the
Just-
question.
Yeah.
So then you get into a fine thing, but those are still motorized. You know what I mean, compared
Right.
to
Yeah.
non-motorized.
Right.
So that is a thing that we need to address.
Yeah.
And that we don't wanna leave hanging.
Yeah.
Non-motorized
Non-internal
recreational trail.
combustion.
Right.
Power.
So there's a couple ways to look at the e-bike question, and
Well, not only e-bikes, but like Segway too. Think about.
yeah,
I'm just putting.
that's just horribly dangerous in the
It
woods.
doesn't matter. They have it. They have it.
So I guess to pause again, another
Yes.
layer here is motorized use. That if we were going to have something about that, that seems like it should be in the by review section, because that is something that would obviously be a very high impact prospect for the neighbors. Like if somebody was to set up like a
But
nitro
e-bicycles
circus.
should be okay. And
Yeah.
it's because that's the only way I can bicycle anymore.
Well-
I'm sorry. So,
Well, to go to a more nuanced discussion on the e-bikes.
yeah.
There's a couple ways to look at it, and one is just e-bikes in general. Then there's pedal assist, and kind of where the breakdown between the two is. On a pedal assist, you have to actively be pedaling to receive support from the electric motor. In a typical e-bike that is not pedal assist, there's a hand throttle, and
I
those
didn't
work more
realize
like
we got to
dirt
that
bikes.
point. I was thinking pedal assist.
Yeah, no, you can get a full-on electric dirt bike now.
Well, not dirt.
The-
dirt
yeah.
bike. Well,
Yeah,
yes.
the equivalent of a 250.
Yeah.
Oh, I understand. No, I
Yeah.
was thinking bicycles.
Yep.
Well, it's a slippery slope, though. Actually, as much as I love cycling, I do a lot of it, but it is admittedly kind of a slippery slope, because the traditional, probably what you're thinking of an electric bike is one thing, but then you start getting into electric dirt bikes, and then electric, even they have
I know,
three-wheelers,
but I'm
four-wheelers,
saying
and all that.
an
and-
electric bicycle.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
distinguishes it a lot.
Well, there's a lot of.
Versus an electric bike, which is a motorcycle.
Motorbike
It's a motorbike.
versus.
Anything.
With an electric motor instead of
Yes.
instead of
That's not
gas.
a bicycle.
So what
Just
I would
Look it
suggest
up.
is a
Could go somewhere down the road of human powered or something.
Yeah.
well, or
I like that, actually.
or we mirror DCR and go class 1 e-bike, because that's where they went. And on all DCR properties, you can now ride class 1 e-bikes. And those are the pedal assist. I think they're limited at, they're either 250 or 350 watts. So they're not huge for power. And they are meant to just be assistive.
That sounds like a good way to go. Let DCR handle the definitions as they
Mm.
evolve over the years.
So so we would look at something like non-motorized recreational trail use, including category 1 e-bikes or class 1 e-bikes, whatever the term is. Does that make sense?
I would see that wouldn't be a huge eyebrow raiser. You know what I mean? Like, to be next door to. I don't think that would be a
That's
problem.
more inclusive than what we have.
Yeah,
so
that's what I
yes.
mean. I think that should be okay.
So I suppose for full disclosure, I'm also on the board of NEMBA, the New England Mountain Bike Association. And this is something that the Mountain Bike Association has argued about for the last 15 years.
Sure.
And where it ended up falling with them is, well, e-bikes aren't really mountain bikes. You should have your own organization, but we don't really promote or advocate. Although class 1 e-bikes are cool and everybody should enjoy them, is how it ultimately ended up. So class 1,
it's 250 watts.
I'm not
What's
sure.
a class 2?
So a class 1 is a electric bike, pedal assist, limited to 20 miles an hour.
Which is fast enough going in the woods. Well, yeah, although I know people on dirt bikes in the woods, so it's like, oh
So what was
geez, what are you
class 2?
thinking?
What's the speed?
Throttle. A class 2 bike features a throttle and maxes out at 20 miles per hour.
Dirt bike. Got it.
Yeah, then a class 3 is 28 miles an hour. I think we should look and actually see what the DCR language is and incorporate that into whatever it is that we end up using. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Right, any further discussion on that one? So petting and feeding zoos, and this one I would like to pause on. Petting zoo, I guess petting and feeding zoo, is that specific enough to not just denote a zoo?
Oh, we had a zoo.
We did?
In Hubbardston, yes.
Yeah.
Wachusett Zoo. Yep.
When was that?
When I was a child, I went to it. There was rumors that the wolf got let go, and yeah, people on
Mountain lion.
yeah, there's a lot of rumors. I don't know how true they were. I was a child, but yeah, it was falling in decline in the 80s, and then a bunch of townspeople donated and helped to kind of gussy it up a little bit with chain link fence and trying to get some enclosures, and it kind of went to the wayside, and
It sold and then got weirder, I guess, from what I
Yeah.
understand.
No kidding.
yeah,
Yeah.
again, I was a kid.
Maybe we could get to where you're concerned about by dropping zoos and just say animal petting and feeding.
Yeah, because like I
Farm
don't
animals.
I don't want to give people like flashes of Tiger King and just
Well, it's like farm animals,
yeah.
not zoo. Farm
Farm
animals.
animals,
Yeah, I like that. Farm.
So rather than
Remove zoo.
petting and feeding farm animals. It sounds kind of awkward, but it's zoo is you start Tiger King.
We can work on the language as
Yeah.
we move forward.
Yeah.
Let's just get the ideas down.
Yeah.
So I like that. So any other discussion on that? I still want to specifically exclude large cats and exotic animals. Although I don't necessarily want to exclude exotic, because if somebody has iguanas, that's
Iguanas
for
aren't
me.
exotic. You can buy them at the pet store.
I know, but
I used to have those as pets. They're not exotic.
so cut your own. Well, hay rides. I don't any concerns on that. Cut your own Christmas trees. Agricultural museums, which I think is already technically allowed. Living history farms. Processing demonstrations.
That might be a catch-22. The next one, but that
Well,
moved in the Board of Health.
Well, I was pausing for processing demonstrations
Oh, sorry.
for just a moment to ask,
Okay.
what does
It's
everybody
fairly
think
vague.
processing demonstrations means? Because, like, are we talking about
Slaughterhouse.
processing hogs, or are,
Roasting coffee, yeah.
or are we talking about like shearing and
Filtering
carding
honey.
and making fiber? Like,
Making jams and jellies or
Compared to
Yeah.
slaughtering. Well, I think the only thing that would be kind of slaughtering would be kind of gross, but if there's if a slaughterhouse opens up and that's what they do.
well, commercial slaughterhouse, is that excluded in our zoning? I thought it was. Well, I don't know. Is this something that anybody else has any thoughts or feelings on, or?
Well, really, you're talking about processing demonstrations consistent with any
It's-
of the allowed uses, right? I mean,
It's probably redundant anyway with bullet 3, educational and demonstrative
yeah.
tours.
Yeah, 'cause it's pretty much the same thing. You're teaching people how to do something, whether it be
Yeah.
but think about, if they were a slaughterhouse, you know, they might be teaching people how to
Do
make kielbasa or something. with-
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And I would just knock it out since it's really covered under 3 anyway.
Does that make sense to everybody, or?
I
Yeah.
think Mark's right, I think it's the same.
Yeah.
It just, this second way just kinda sounds sometimes gross. Or may sound gross.
So ice cream bakery facilities. What's everybody's thoughts on that?
Would this be, cause this is one of those by right things, so, but that, you'd have to pull in like the Board of Health and all kinds of stuff, so would it actually be by right?
Well, that's true on a lot of these,
Okay,
Yeah.
alright,
Um,
okay.
that there may be other licensing requirements or such. But, yeah, I mean,
That's
it
your
introduces the question of scale.
Yeah.
Well,
So, I like having this in some form in there because it's the kind of thing that people have in their minds. Like, they're
Yeah.
like, oh, well,
ice cream fun.
why can't we be more like Davis, or why can't we be like
Kimball's.
Rhoda Spring or
Yeah,
Kimball's or
something,
so
yeah.
on. So, I think people in general will like it, but I do think that there is a question of scope, which I suppose we're going to manage from the side of, well, where is this rule going to be effective and how is it going to be effective? So those potentially separate questions, and maybe this is just an issue we flag for the moment. I don't know, what's everybody else's thoughts?
I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah, alright.
I mean, as for the farm, I think that's what people think of, like when you think of
So,
a
Yeah.
farm
yeah,
stand.
I mean,
I mean, I'm almost at the point of wanting to put this in the by review category.
no, why? We have Country Hen with umpteen trillion chickens within a few hundred feet of town.
Yeah.
What have you got worried about ice cream and bakeries?
Well, this is consumable stuff to the public, where the Country Hen doesn't have I mean, they sell eggs obviously, but, which is consumable, but it's like in a different.
It's still gonna be regulated by the Board of Health,
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
No matter what. It's
Why are
not
we
like it's,
limiting to ice cream and bakery?
There's one further down that says
It says
restaurant. We haven't
restaurants,
got-
okay,
Yeah.
alright.
We haven't got that far yet.
I
I already did. I was way ahead, I was already on page two.
I mean, I'm just, you know, I'm just looking at something of the scale of Kimball's, where you've got parking issues and traffic issues and. you
Well,
know,
and that
and-
I think gets addressed on how we end up defining accessory, or how we end up setting up the gatekeeping.
Yeah,
yeah, I think that comes more under the gatekeeping rules
Yeah,
rather
okay.
than what it is.
yeah, fair
Mhm.
enough.
So
Okay.
let's just, I'll put a star on that as something to keep track of. So moving down the list, unless anybody has anything else they wanna add to that. So local products, retail operations, craft food products. Seems reasonable to me. Anybody feel otherwise? On-farm restaurants where a significant portion of products sold is prepared on site with farm crops grown or raised on site.
I would,
This whole phrase, which is common to this and several of the following uses, is from the Rutland.
Yep.
Accessory
the only thing I,
bylaw. These types of categories just as frequently show up in these types of things without that phrase. Personally, I don't think it's necessary.
So,
Yeah, the phrase where
Yeah.
a significant portion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
of
What's a
products
significant
sold,
portion, yeah.
Yeah,
so,
that's gonna be really difficult
yeah,
in our
Mhm.
area.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what I mean, it could be like farm to table kind of stuff, but not necessarily their farm, it could be, well, the farm down the street does pigs, and the farm over there does this, and the farm over here does that, and I got it from all the farms.
Right.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's not necessarily their farm,
Yeah.
but it's a local farm.
I mean, New Hampshire has, farm cooperatives where the CSAs, this farm grows 10 items, this farm goes 10 items, and it's available for this one joint CSA, so that they can specialize better what grows on their, best on their farm. And I think you have to apply that to these as well. But it's, you know,
So there's
there must be better phrasing, wording for that.
there's a precedent that I look at. It's what happens with farmer brewers and farmer distillers. I believe the state has similar language on that, and they do nothing to enforce it whatsoever. Like Sam Adams in Boston and Harpoon in Boston were both farmer brewers, and really just meant they paid a whole lot less for their permit from the state in order to brew. Like it made it so it was like a $500 permit instead of a $10,000 permit, and for that it was essentially that language combined with like or locally sourced, and people just use that as a loophole for getting their state licenses.
So that's probably why Rutland did it this way.
It's probably why it came in there. At least it's a plausible explanation of why it would have came in there. I agree that we shouldn't put stuff in there that is either going to be difficult to enforce or nobody's going to really care about to start with. But the other reason I think they might have done that is in order to more tie it to the underlying agricultural purpose,
Yeah.
which I think we can also do through the gatekeeping, which we'll talk about in a separate section. So I don't know that we need it here, but it might be helpful from a public relations standpoint.
Is there a way to make it, like maybe get rid of the word significant portion of products, you know, and do something like locally, or I don't know, just sourced within town, sourced that, yeah, I don't know.
I think you're gonna get into
I know,
real
there's-
difficulty.
Yeah, I know, I'm like trying to think of it, I'm like, this isn't
Yeah.
working, it's not working in my own head.
Well, we're here to brainstorm
You just said a
stuff.
phrase, tied to the underlying agricultural base, is that the last word you?
Purpose, I think it was. But, yeah.
Purpose.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Is that the phrase?
it depends on what
that's
tool we
better?
wind up aiming for.
Yeah.
Is that enough of a definition to remove where a significant portion, blah, 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 say on-farm restaurants tied to the underlying agricultural purpose? Something to think about.
Possibly.
It's maybe a little closer to what we're hoping for.
I think the reason I pause is because I think about either Stone Cow or Milk Room, and yeah, I suppose you can feed the spent grain to the cows and that's connected because you can say it's closed loop agriculture. But that's not really...
Right, they don't grow their own barley, or actually I think they might have a few hop plants there,
Yeah.
but they don't.
They grow their own hops.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, not much.
It's,
Yeah,
they have a lot more than what's by the road.
do they?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. But point being though, they're importing the ingredients and then making it there on site, or like we do for the winery. Actually, you know, we're growing our own grapes up there, but we could just as easily, or somebody else could start a winery and import 100% of their grapes or juice from California, Chile, you name it. I mean, wherever. But then I was thinking though, if that were the case, they would no longer, the crop or the materials wouldn't be grown or raised on site, but at the same time though, if they are actually vinifying it or brewing it there on site, then they'd fall into another category of local products, retail operation, or which one was it? One of the other categories already discussed, where it's made on site, even if the ingredients aren't grown on site, it's still made on site.
Yeah, 'cause I would find it hard to think that for a restaurant or winery or brewery to be able to grow all of it, a significant portion, to do any of those three is gonna be a tough sell. To
Yeah.
have I mean, he's starting out, and you know, like even Hardwick Winery, I don't know, do they grow all their stuff on site? What about the other? That's what I mean, like,
Yeah.
and none of them, like Stone Cow, the Hardwick Winery, the other breweries that are in the area, none of them are like detrimental. You know what I mean? They're not egregious in being too loud or bad neighbors or bad businesses in the town. You know what I mean? None of them are a bad thing. Most people look at all of those as a contributing farm business to the town. So to hinder them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
I would just clarify, Stone Cow has received some pushback, but it hasn't specifically been because of the breweries. It's been because of special events like
Yes.
running the
Yeah,
Tough Mudder
right.
through
Exactly.
Yeah,
the streams and
20,000
stuff.
people there.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's, but that would be again through the gatekeeping, not this part of it. Because again, that's where you get into trouble when you start having massive functions and you don't adequately do parking or having details and
Yeah.
having this, that, and so the rest of your neighbors aren't totally pissed off and the rest of the town can't drive by without it becoming a menace, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, my feeling on it is we don't use the where phrase at all.
And just leave it as on-farm restaurants?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Leave that out on all of them,
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
under the gatekeeping guidelines, if you will.
You can even put a
So-
notation on there saying something about see further
Yeah.
for details or something, you know what I mean, like something that, so that way we don't freak people out.
So on the other three, let's
I don't
come back
know.
to those in a moment and just
Sorry.
look at this one, cause I think there is potentially an issue with the other three we need to clean up.
Okay.
But as far as on-farm restaurants, I think that does make sense, although on-farm is, do we think of that as a term that's defined or needs to be defined? Or is it just a common sense, plain
Seems
English, it's
pretty
literally on the
self-explanatory.
farm?
On farm is fine.
The
Seems
lawyers do stuff.
self-explanatory to me. Yeah.
Well, this is all gonna have to be vetted anyway, right?
Yeah, it will
Yeah,
be.
so
Yeah. No, this will have to go through public hearing and
it's gonna
we
get
would
kicked
probably
over
wanna
to
bounce it.
law, yeah, KP law, right?
Yeah, well, we don't have to, but we should,
I
Yeah.
would, yeah.
before it goes to the state.
Yeah,
Cause it stinks to write stuff and then have the Attorney General come back and be
Kick
like,
it
no,
out.
you can't do it. So I think that makes sense for on-farm restaurants. Okay, so the next three, and I think we should handle them kind of as a group, because they're all essentially the same thing with different language.
Yeah.
I think we need to first allow the underlying winery or brewery or distillery use, because I'm not sure that it currently is, or would be from just adding that language.
I didn't follow.
neither did I was like, wait a minute,
Okay,
what?
so,
Viticulture itself is, but you mean like is distilling,
yeah,
yeah, cause
Or
there's a
brewing.
big distinction there, yeah.
yeah. So we have brewery tours and beer tasting, where a significant portion of the product sold, blah, 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 blah. But we don't have farmer brewer, or the actual brewery operation
Okay.
appearing on the list. Unless somebody sees that falling under a different section. The winery, yeah, it falls under.
Well,
Well, the viticulture piece of it does, but there is for winery operations, there's
Oh,
very
I
similar
see
to
what you're
the,
saying.
there's a farmer winery license, just like a farmer brewery
Yeah.
license, that it's sort of a catch-all at the state level.
so then are you suggesting that would be reviewed by like a special permit or by right? You're saying like that those need to be in that one of those sides?
Well, no, they should be three well, the winery essentially is already.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they would be three separate items for the actual underlying operation itself, before you start talking about the tours and the tastings.
Right.
Okay, so you mean a previous bullet point beforehand on that
Yeah.
same section? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
essentially an inserted bullet point for each of them. Farmer winery, do they call it farmer vinter? I don't know.
Okay.
Farmer winery.
Farmer winery, yeah, so farmer winery, farmer brewery, and farmer distillery.
Okay. Then yeah, if it's gonna clean it up, because we can't have one without the other, right?
Yeah.
It's kinda,
Like,
Well-
but I can have brewery tours, but you
Yes.
can't have a brewery.
we're just all gonna open
And-
this six-pack right here, and we're gonna tour. It's just gonna be great.
Yeah, and what we are also going to be creating with that is we are going to be creating some work for the Board of Health on that, because specifically with a brewery or distillery, they tend to have a bunch of low pH wastewater. I don't think we need to address that at what we're currently doing here, but that's something that the Board of Health will end up having fall onto it from what we're doing here. But
Just we'll get it sorted out in the next 3 years, 'cause this is gonna be my last 3.
I hope you get it done.
So let's get her done.
Yeah, and there's lots of ways that people deal with that. There's a lot of scholarly papers on it, well outside of our scope here though.
Right.
Does that make sense to everybody? So well, essentially, now for brewery and for distillery and really winery, I think it does make sense that there is the connection to products being prepared or grown on site. I think that does matter there. I'm trying to think of a way of how you would run a brewery without having it brewed, how you do a brewery tour without brewing on site.
Well, are we
But-
saying though that you have to actually grow your grains on site and you have to actually grow your hops on site, or your grapes for that matter, or?
I think the word is significant, that needs to be out of there.
Yeah. Well,
Significant portion.
significant portion of products sold is prepared on site. Oh, I guess it is prepared on
With
site
Oh,
with
crops
farm crops
grown.
grown on site.
And
But it's not saying significant farm
Yeah.
crops grown on site, it's just saying that it's mostly made on site with,
How about a portion where a
So that's-
portion of products sold is prepared
raised.
or grown on site?
Oh, there we go,
Right, that sounds clearer.
yeah.
So does that make sense to everybody for all
Yeah.
three of those?
Yeah,
So just to read one as a sample, it would be winery tours and wine tasting where a significant portion of products sold is prepared or grown on site. That's what those three would look like now.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, cause then that gives you wiggle room.
Yeah.
So,
don't forget
so are
the
you gonna
farm.
have to introduce that on all 6 of the,
Yeah, and a lot of the
both the
catchments.
production and the tours?
Right,
Do we need it on the production, you think? Cause the state requirement is a little fuzzy on what actually qualifies you as a farmer brewer, but there is a state definition.
alright, can we maybe look at that and review this the next meeting again?
Yeah.
Let's do that. We know where we wanna head. We just try and come up with the best wording,
Sure.
yeah.
So Kathy doesn't wanna be here till 9:30.
Well,
I
this,
don't,
I don't blame you though,
I
I don't
did-
blame you,
I,
yeah, no,
without knowing what the state's definition is off the top of my head,
yeah, that makes sense.
cause the closer we are to sharing the same language, the less likely there is issues with the state, the county,
Yeah.
or anybody else.
Yeah.
That's all I'm trying to get to.
Yep.
Nothing else.
no, I hear you,
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense to look at.
huh?
I wanna go home.
Okay, Keith wants to go home.
Hey, this is the most
exhausted.
important thing for tonight, even if we do
Yes.
nothing else
No,
on the
that's- yeah.
agenda,
That's good.
running
Yeah.
down this list is
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a good thing.
the biggest thing. So that moves us all the way down to outdoor recreation, fishing, hunting, bird watching, natural features. I saw an example that was from Vermont, and they specifically enumerated game preserves in there. Is that something we want to think about? Include, exclude, leave it as it is? Cause really
That
we're,
would be a separate item.
I'm not sure what
Yeah.
this would distinguish that from this.
Right.
natural features.
It's like using the word zoos. You don't wanna do that.
Yeah, well, it'd be, keeping game specifically for the purpose of hunting. And really the only example that I can think of, like just running through hypotheticals there, somebody was to do pigs or boars or something like that.
Oh, jeez.
Or
No.
Yeah,
pheasants.
exactly.
Or, any, yeah.
More
or
likely, I
any
think
type
they
of-
already stock pheasants at Barry Falls Dam, don't they? Or-
Yeah,
I'm
Right,
pretty sure they do.
but you could have a private preserve that
Yeah.
does
fenced
that.
in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
Have boars.
a privately
Yeah.
stocked pond,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there used to be one in Bolton.
See somebody digging their own pond and
I
like,
noticed
weird
I
fish
noticed
in
a
there.
sign over on Bemis Road the other day, over by Pinecrest, that was something to that effect, like game preserve or hunting preserve or something. I gotta go back and
Yeah,
See if
now
there's more
you're
description.
curious, yeah.
Slower.
Like, I'm gonna get out, take pictures of this,
So-
what is this?
So it might be a non-issue, but I just wanted to bring it up for the discussion purpose because, yeah, you can extrapolate out a hypothetical that becomes offensive on that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Where if somebody's like, let's do boars,
Yeah, I might cause some problems.
then you'd run into state problems. if you
Yeah.
Did that.
Invasive species.
Well, yeah, they're well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Yeah, we could spend a half hour.
Yeah, I know, yeah, I know.
Let's not have that under
Yeah.
by right.
Yes.
So that is a possible solution to move it down into review. But I think for the most part, the fishing, hunting, bird watching, and natural features, those are all not really offensive at all. It's really just that one hypothetical that
Mhm.
kind of makes it
Mm-hmm.
crazy.
Yeah, I say leave the hypothetical out. So, let's not get hypothetical, let's just
Yeah.
do normal people things, please.
Excluding wild pigs.
Yes. Oh, I could just see it like, somebody stocks a pond with weird fish that are totally illegal, like Asian carp or something, and gars and stuff, and they get, it gets into the stream. And
Yeah,
just-
that
Yeah.
What a nightmare.
that could be
Just what
another
a
one of their
nightmare.
state guidelines that make this a non-issue.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like a lot of those are invasive species. So
Yeah. So let's leave it for the moment. Unless anybody feels differently. So horseback riding, rural bed and breakfast, and garden tours.
I don't think we actually need rural bed and breakfast in there.
So
We've
Is
got-
that
we've
up
got-
to the
We've got
definition
guest
of
houses
size?
and bed and breakfast in the existing zone.
yeah, that's a bed and breakfast is by right.
yeah, it is already by
What
right.
I'm not sure what makes it rural.
I
Yeah.
don't either.
So where
Everything in town is rural.
I know.
where it comes up, and where I think it does warrant, well, does it come in there? Well, I'll save that discussion, it's further down. Yeah, so that's unnecessary, since it's already by right.
Okay.
And then garden tours.
There were two others that I thought of, and one of them actually has to do with fish. As unlikely as it seems, aquaculture. I don't know if anybody
Yeah.
would ever. I mean, supposedly you can grow tilapia in a bathtub, so I don't know. It's probably only a matter until
Yeah,
tough time
there's
until somebody tries.
Place in West Boylston that's all, above ground pools and they
Yeah.
grow shrimp.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, isn't it already,
Is that under the other category in the beginning or not?
well, it's not in the list of agriculture or horticulture.
Yeah, I didn't see
It is by the state, though. I think
Yeah,
that's
I
where
did
it
think
is.
the state had it in
Aquaculture,
its definition.
because I was like, what the hell
Is
is
it? Okay.
aquaculture? I had to Google it. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, never mind. I know what that is.
Oh, it's not, no, it's not on existing.
No.
No.
So, yeah, that's a good one.
The other one that, I think is probably a lot more likely and is here already is, beekeeping. Is
Oh, yeah.
some, as much as I love beekeeping, I'm a former beekeeper myself, but, you know, you get the wrong neighbors or somebody who has allergies or whatever, and it could all of a sudden be an issue.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good one.
I agree with both of those. I think they both
Yeah.
probably should be there. Where I think they'll get stars too, cause we'll have to talk more about what our methods, what we do for gatekeeping, cause maybe on how much we lean on something being an accessory, those are really primary uses, or it could be not so much beekeeping. Beekeeping is usually an accessory use. Most people I know who do it have some other agricultural thing they do. But yeah, they'll need to get the stars for further discussion too. Anybody have anything else to add to that part of the list? Alright, so on to the by review special permit section. So we have weddings, receptions, or private parties.
Everybody has private parties, so you need to, I don't know about that.
Those
Maybe.
are,
Maybe if it's a guest load.
I think it's assumed private parties for a fee because it appears, or for a commercial purpose.
Private parties for a commercial purpose. Got it.
Where,
And I guess we should say that because we all have parties at our homes and stuff. So I think we should define it for a commercial purpose. Perfect wording. You're so good at this.
so I think there's also more discussion to have on weddings, reception, private parties, because a wedding isn't always just wedding. Not all weddings are equal, I guess is more accurately what I'm trying to say there. Cause like,
Many ways.
6 people standing next to a grapevine exchanging vows is not gonna be impactful at all. 600 people watching those 6 people
Yeah.
and then getting drunk afterwards
Yeah.
are gonna be impactful.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's something that needs to be stratified or more thoroughly designed. And this is something that has come up as an actual consideration, although it's since gone away, because we did have a large farm property in town, and they didn't submit a special permit. They just came in and said, would you accept a special permit? And the planning board said potentially, for a country club wedding venue thing. That's why country clubs get complicated. But it is something that people do look at this community to. That's really ultimately the purpose of that story. It is something that actually comes up, and it's something that people are currently doing now, with farm-related properties. So I think there's a big element of scope there.
Yeah. Aside from, can I digress for a minute?
Yeah.
Into the buyer review category in general. Did you try and research legal requirements for a review body for this type of bylaw?
I only just started. I don't have anything to report back yet.
Okay. Because I mean, a lot of these types of issues, we may not necessarily be able to write into the bylaw, but they would be dealt with by the review body, whatever that is.
Yeah. That's a good point too.
Yeah, because if you come in and say, I wanna put a wedding venue, and it's going to be this, small area, it's going to seat max 50, but we're not doing receptions, we're just having the wedding. That is a different kettle of fish coming in front of the planning board than, I'm going to build something that seats 300 people, and we plan on doing receptions there, and we plan on doing, 6 every weekend. here's my paperwork in front of the planning
Mhm.
board. So that's two separate, you're going to deal, the planning board, if that's where this is going, obviously by special permit to the planning board. The planning board is going to deal with those things very separately on their, and as long as they stay within their plan, that should be fine, right? And they get a permit, and they stay within it, and you give them the criteria they have to hit. But if they, that small little wedding venue that says they wanna have the small amount and not do reception, changes it, then their special permit gets revoked on what they're doing. Say they're like, we're doing 800 people and there's nothing, I got a special permit.
Yeah.
You automatically,
This is a really big issue, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you said you didn't wanna get into it tonight.
no, but that's what that's my thought process is any special permit could be revoked if they aren't following A, what they presented, and B, what the terms and conditions were. Am
So-
I wrong?
I want to schedule this discussion
Okay.
for a future meeting.
Sorry.
And I suppose the next meeting, because that will also give me an opportunity to bring some of this up as a discussion with the planning board.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good idea.
Because ultimately, the planning board are the ones that approve this to go forward and go onto a town warrant. So, and the planning board can redline it and blue pencil it and to whatever they want once it gets there, once it goes to public hearing, so. It would be better for us to present something where we've got feedback from them and they know that those thoughts are already included than to just throw something up to have everybody edit away on. So, yeah, I'll bring that up at the next planning board meeting, and we'll put that on as an agenda item for the next meeting.
So I mean, for tonight, rather than getting into, what the details of stratification would look like,
Mhm.
just let's talk about the uses and see if there's stuff here that we're not interested in, period, or if there's other stuff that we would be interested in.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
So then I guess to that point, yeah, weddings, reception, private parties, that I think is something that everybody's interested in. We all think needs some kind of review because there's lots of hypotheticals that you can run where you run up with things that are problems for the neighbors. And I think it's the same thing with concerts, festivals, and special events. Where I think there's special events feels like one of those things where, and I know maybe it's getting into the same conversation as before, but it feels like the same kind of thing where there should be like a lower level version of it. 'Cause like say, like your special event is a craft sale and swap or something like that. I'm looking to see if we covered that with something else here already. Local products retail, yeah, that's regular.
Yeah, cause compared to a small craft fair, compared to like say a food truck festival, those are two radically different ideas. Unless it's a small food truck, you got like
Yeah.
3,
Well,
but
yeah,
that usually doesn't draw in the crowds, and the food trucks don't wanna come.
Yeah. Well, it's really like the Tough Mudders and like those kinds
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
that-
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that kinda, then if you start getting into that kinda stuff, then
Yeah.
yes, that's like super,
Right.
What about like those crafting kind of gatherings?
I've been to them, yes, all over the place.
Well, yeah.
What would you like to know?
Well,
All different shapes, sizes, and types, all
can,
over the state.
can we come up with a version of that should be included by right? I guess is really ultimately what the question is. And what does that look like?
Well, even the largest craft fair I've been to, and you're talking like 300 plus vendors, The only major thing was it was, you know, it's during the day, so it's not like it's an overnight, late at night kind of thing. It stops. The biggest thing is parking. Parking and having, if there's not somewhere to go off to the side to park, then you could clog up in theory a roadway. You know, especially if people are waiting to park into somewhere. So like think of the Red Apple Farm when they do their what is it, Johnny Appleseed Craft Festival. That roadway turns into a zoo.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a small back road, so luckily there's not too many people. They park fields down the street and stuff like that, but it's a zoo. But it's during the day, so it would be like you're basically looking at like Rieta Ranch kind of influx for the X amount of hours that are there. The smaller craft fairs that I've been to at like farms and little small festivals and stuff that have, you know, up to like 30 crafters are very non-invasive. You know what I mean? Like you just, it's an all day thing. People are in and out. So it's the big ones, like when you think of like the Red Apple Farm, things like that have like the Johnny Appleseed weekends. But again, it's still during the day. It's not an evening. There's not like drunken, intoxicated people running around. There's not, even if they had a band, it's not overly aggressive, you know? So, you know what, again, the only thing is like maybe a cop and the parking issues.
Well,
would
that,
be-
Which is why you want to know if there's a way that it can be included
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
right.
yeah, when you start, when you get to the, you probably need a cop for it, where clearly in the, it should go through
Yes.
some kind of review.
Yes.
But ultimately, I just want to throw, is there a level where of craft fair or artisan gathering or exchange of artisan products where it doesn't rise to that level and it should be by right?
You could, if you did it that way.
Really hard to define.
I know,
Yeah, I
well,
know.
the only way to do it would be like under so many vendors, or you'd have to
Yeah.
put a number to it.
Right?
Okay.
But then again, using for a special event, you're not having vendors there. So, I mean,
No.
same thing, a special event, you know, somebody has a horse show and there's 5 horses, it's different than somebody having a horse show in
True.
central, you know, New England shows up.
Yeah.
Uh,
That is true.
That's not a vendor situation.
No, but I think you're more likely to have, in this town, people with some kind of small or large, like small, like, you know, event that
How
would
do you
have
do that?
crafters and things like that. Maybe a food truck, you know what I mean?
So, so I think from what I'm hearing, it stays on the review list, and we're just gonna have to really sort out what we're doing with the review list.
Yeah, maybe there's
Yeah.
a short form of review.
Yeah.
A special
If
short
you're under
form.
such and such size,
Yeah.
so in the Board of Health,
Yeah.
for the, one-day events, we have a short form for inspections of all the food trucks at the town fair and field day and stuff. We have a short form.
Mhm.
They still get a permit, it's a lower fee, cause it's only one day. Very, you know, and it's a short form of review.
Okay.
I've always been of the mind that we would be looking at somehow defining multiple tiers of review.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think that just adding these uses to our existing zoning works, because our existing review process is balls to the wall, you know, give us everything.
Yes. Not
Yeah.
paid for this.
Okay, so we'll leave that there. Lodging other than rural bed and breakfast. I like how that is open-ended, and if Whitney was here, she would spend the next 10 minutes talking about how we need to be more accepting of short-term rentals in this town.
Does that include campgrounds?
That is an interesting question.
That was,
Yeah.
remember the original question that I had, what does this cause that was my thing, cause I'm picturing like yurts and teepees and tree houses
Yeah.
and things like that, but then I'm like, alright, what happens if RVs, but then again, I think of like when the horse people come for a riding thing in our woods, they come in with their trucks, camper thing, trailer with the horses. They have to park somewhere for the weekend.
Yeah.
They're not, they usually, you know, you find an open field somewhere for a farmer that allows them to park on the weekends and stuff like that. It's not a campground, it's a special event type thing, but they can't leave their horses, so they can't go to a hotel, they can't go, you know what I mean? They have to kinda come together and park. So, that kind of thing has to be thought about in a little bit different light, cause it's not like a campground like with, you know, 50 trailers parked side by side, RV central, you know, like when you think of a motor, you know, kind of thing. So, I don't know what the right answer is, and again, I think it has to do with tiers maybe.
So, there is a category, of rural campgrounds that the Board of Health reviews now.
Yes, cause we have two.
Right. And, that might be the way to define a campground where a farmer wants to have 3 yurts or 2 hardside campers for a weekend, people to come and learn to grow vegetables or something, or learn to ride horses or whatever. So maybe that could be under the right, is to have rural campgrounds, cause their size and what the scope is very limited to what they can do
Okay.
and how many people they can have.
Is that a definition in state law or something?
I think
or-
so. I don't have it, but we can, let me try and remember to ask Valerie to pull up the definition, maybe.
But that would be for a small amount,
Uh,
so that could eliminate, and again, with the tiers, and then we'd have to figure out something if somebody wanted to go a little bit larger.
And those are currently inspected by the Board of Health already. They file for a rural campground permit for the year, and they
Yeah.
get one inspection.
Yeah, well, cause the campground
Per
in
year.
Hubbardston has more than a few campsites, there's quite a few down there. I've been down there a couple times, it's not like 5,
That's 16.
I would,
On
They're
Flag?
allowing more?
yeah,
Yeah,
there's more than that.
Yeah, there's.
Which one?
On,
on Flag Road, you mean?
yeah.
Yeah,
Curtis's?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
There's actually a number of sites.
Peaceful Acres, thank
Yes,
you,
thank
like
you,
holy
yeah.
brain fart.
They're not a rural campground.
Okay, so then what are you referring to about the rural? What's the other rural then? There's Bella's.
It's Bella's place.
Okay, well, you
it's-
said 2, so I thought you
You
were
said
talking,
2.
oh. I did, well, it's 2 campgrounds. Okay,
Okay,
alright,
so
my
long
bad,
story
sorry.
short, it sounds like we have two
Yes.
things here. We
Okay.
have the idea of a rural campground and we have camping. One of those ends up in review, one of those is likely by right, depending upon how we end up going
Right.
with what we track for reviews.
Yeah, because the
Um,
rural campground is limited to like 16 or 20 sites max or
Okay.
something.
Alright,
Yeah, I
And it's a short, very short stay. It's, you know, like a weekend.
Yeah.
It's not like Peaceful Acres where you can park your hard side and stay a month.
Yeah.
You don't have that right at a rural campground.
okay,
I think I lean towards, and it's obviously gonna depend upon that conversation, I think I lean towards some kind of review for either form of camping. Just so it gets people into the system and gets them into the Board of Health to start talking about those things. And yeah, well, we wouldn't want it to be like a full site plan review in front of the planning board, but
We already have that requirement by law, so, for rural campgrounds. So I don't know that it has to be reviewed by anybody except the Board of Health at this point, and we already do that.
Yeah. Well, really, at this point,
It's just whether you're allowing it under an agricultural use.
yeah,
And that's what I'm saying could be, a rural campground could be added to the by right section.
yeah.
And they could have up to 16 sites.
Well, arguably, we don't have anything in our current zoning that would currently allow, a rural campground.
In planning, but she's saying
Yeah.
in Board of Health does. For up to 16 you said?
I think it's,
Give or take.
give or take.
Okay.
I'm
I
gonna
won't
I'm
quote you
gonna
on
have-
that. I won't
I'm
quote
gonna have
you on
Mallory pull up the actual,
that. Okay, the numbers and stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
it's a state code.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't currently have anything in our zoning that would allow that. There's lots of things happening in town that we don't have anything currently in our zoning that allows. That's one of the reasons we're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
But doesn't the state supersede?
So that's what comes under the Board of Health. If there's, no specific listing,
Then it falls to the state.
then the Board of Health, follows the state codes.
Okay.
yeah.
It's
So in other words,
trying
because
to
there's
say it clearly, but
yeah, no, it's okay.
I'm a little tired, sorry.
And so because it's not in our specific zoning code, it falls to the state, which kicks it
More
to.
like it happened by our current zoning and inspectional services system, and now we're currently just working with what we got. That's more of how I would look at that.
Okay, alright.
But in any case,
Yeah,
they're not missed, they're not out there operating without review already. Both Peaceful, which is
Mhm.
a commercial site.
Yep.
And Bella's, which is a rural.
Yeah.
Site, they're getting inspected every
Okay.
year. So are the sports camps and so on and so
Mhm.
forth.
okay, so, yeah, that is likely gonna draw even more discussion.
Oh yes, I'm sure
Because
of it.
that is actually what I believe will be the most contentious, that and weddings will be the two most contentious bullet points when we go in front of the town on this. They,
Okay.
by far, miles above anything else. Those are gonna be the ones that people are gonna care about the most, so,
Well, and yeah,
Breweries will probably be up there too.
yeah.
yeah, but I think they're gonna be pretty popular.
Yeah.
Well, they always are.
I don't know if you saw what happened when I went up and talked about how we needed to tighten up the marijuana bylaw for a little bit so we can write a better one. We like certain things in this town.
That's what makes Hubbardston.
So, working down the list here, lodging, we just talked about that quite a bit. And yeah, that as it is obviously includes short-term rentals, because other than lodging, other than rural bed and breakfast is literally anything else. Art galleries or sculpture parks,
I'm
it kinda
confused.
seemed weird
I'm
that
confused,
made
why
it
would
a
that be a special permit?
but-
Yeah, cause I'm thinking, have you guys ever
That
been
was
to
kinda
this,
my
the
reaction too.
yeah,
Yeah.
the Sister Sanctuary there, or whatever, Three Sister Sanctuary? Cause like, that's what I think about, and I
Yeah.
don't understand.
You can literally do anything in this town if you call it a church, though, because of the way the Bible. Anyways, that's a different thing.
Yeah, but I don't understand why I would need a special review.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anyway,
I
so
think that's
move
gonna-
it into by right.
I
Yeah.
would, because that's just gonna cause the planning board a bunch of nightmares.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, for no reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like where that becomes clearly becomes something, like if you, when you look at what goes on with like some of those farm breweries or wineries, like they end up having like local artists hang stuff on the wall with tags and stuff on it. Like, did that just become an art gallery? Yeah, having that not even be a discussion issue, I
That'd be a
fully
good
support
idea.
moving it. Yeah. So next one, non-motorized active recreational uses, including but not limited to disc golf, zip lines, and archery.
Go-karts. Oh wait, that's motorized.
That's motorized, but
Pedal cars.
yeah, this goes to
Pedal cars.
Pedal cars, there we
this
go.
goes to a lot of the ecotourism stuff,
Yes.
cause like you think of like
The
the
fun
ropes
things,
courses
yeah.
and like that kind of stuff.
What about like mini golf?
Mini golf, I believe, is in our commercial zone.
We had one.
Yeah, I know, but I think that is something that's,
Remnants are still there.
well, we'll need to talk about that,
Oh, okay.
in about a minute. So that is everything that's on the list, and we've added rural campground / camping, to figure out where that goes, depending upon how we come up with our review process. So other things to add to this list. Are you suggesting mini golf?
Sure. Well, think of, again, like an ice cream,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
with mini golf, and then they come and, you know, they pick their apples at the same time, or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, if they had enough land that they're still farming, obviously, because they're a farm, and they could put a couple, you know, because mini golf actually doesn't really take that. Like, look at Cape Cod; they like just slam those things
I
in.
know,
They're
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it doesn't take up a lot of room, realistically.
We would debate about whether or not that's a good thing. But,
I,
yeah, no, I think it should be added to the review, because that is something that does often come up in that kind of.
that kind of you know,
Yeah,
context. People are getting the ice cream, they let the kids go, and then the mom and dad go
yeah,
over and check out the restaurant or the museum craft sculpture or whatever, you know, whatever the farm's
Yeah.
got going on.
but it does seem subject to review.
Yeah.
How about, anybody else have any strong feelings on that? How about additional items to add to the list? And let's spend, just to make sure we spend time thinking about this, I'm going to cut off, the next item on the agenda, and we'll just have a very brief discussion about it and have a more thorough discussion at the next meeting, which was develop a draft list of property criteria. We'll spend a few minutes talking about how people feel about that and do it in more detail at the next meeting. Just because this, I believe, is the most important part of the process that we're currently working on, so, I would prefer us to spend more time on this, so.
Under this non-motorized, I feel like we're forgetting something. Well, it says but not limited
not
to,
limited
so
to,
I
yeah.
guess we
Yeah.
don't have to
Yeah.
worry about it, but.
Just trying to think of like all the farms that I've gone to, you know. It's like I've been to so many farms over the years, cause they have like pumpkin chunkin' and things like that at different farms, especially for seasonal stuff. You know, there's whole areas like when you go to the corn, especially like corn mazes and stuff like that are super child friendly. There's like splash parks and things like that, but there's also a lot of outdoor activities, but they're usually, again, non-motorized,
Yeah.
less than disc golf and things like that, you know, like the whole field of area, you know, fire pit and stuff like that.
How about shooting ranges, or is that sufficiently non-agricultural that it's not really part of the scope of this?
It's an interesting question.
Is
It comes
there-
in under country club.
There might be state jurisdiction over that.
Yeah, but it does come in under country club. If
Okay.
you were to have a club or an organization where your underlying sport is to shoot at clay pigeons, and you had a board and all of that stuff, it already comes in under country club.
Okay.
The country club is more about your organization than the activity that you're doing. So there just needs to be an activity, then there needs to be a member board and all of that stuff.
And if recreationally, if somebody wanted to just invite a few friends over and start throwing clay pigeons,
They pretty much do that. As long as you're not within 500 feet of a house and
Yeah,
not
Yeah,
being
all
sure,
that
yeah.
shot.
stuff,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I know this is one of those things where I wish we weren't running a little bit late, because there's definitely stuff we're leaving on the table, and we can come back and reopen this, but trying to be as thorough as we can tonight is.
Yeah.
How about parades?
They're not actually on the property though.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a qualifier, never mind.
And to the extent that they were, I think that would be a festival or
That's
special
true.
event.
Yep, covered.
Like a tractor show or pull. Special event,
Yeah, 'cause like, that's the whole thing, these
Yeah.
large, when you do something so broad as a special event, that's a very broad brush.
Yeah.
And could be, you know, in the same
Antique.
with not limited to.
Gas motor,
Yeah.
shows, or,
Stationary engine,
yeah, stationary.
small tractor pull.
Yep, yep.
Rodeo. Although, funny thing about the rodeo,
Rodeo.
Hudson allowed a permit for a rodeo, specifically a Brazilian rodeo, and like 15,000 people showed up.
Jesus.
It was at the Elks. It apparently was quite the thing.
Alright.
So,
I wish I'd known about that. That sounds like fun.
I know. I would. It apparently was an epic fun disaster.
A big
But
fun
yeah.
disaster, great.
Yeah, like tens of thousands of people showed up, but that's more on the board that allows it than on the underlying rules.
Right.
But anyways, Hudson isn't going to allow a rodeo at rodeo.
No, I would imagine not, they were like,
Yes,
no.
not.
Oh my goodness.
Plus they have it at the Morgan Bowl, just,
Well, no, it was on the Elks property right when they were building the school, so behind it. So yeah, the cars were apparently parked going all the way up into the neighborhood, up the hill, up like Ordway and all that stuff, and all the way to downtown, and yeah.
Nope.
I can't think of anything else.
What
I can
else
think of
on
things,
the
but
list?
they're weird. They're
No,
like-
go for it.
No, trust me,
As long as they're not crazy weird.
they're,
'cause
well,
probably on
when you
TV.
start making me think, I go like into weird
Yeah.
places sometimes, so I'm like, not that I would ever do it, but there's like all kinds of crazy, like you could do anything. Like, no.
Go under special events.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I
pretty
mean,
much,
it could be
yeah.
under
Yeah.
special events.
That covers a lot of things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking. I'm trying to think of like what, and it's like, well, even if someone really did wanna have that, it could be a special event.
I know we talked about it before, but slaughterhouses, I don't know, does that need to be specifically called? I mean, I know we have, I think you said there's provisions for a commercial, large scale slaughterhouse, but I mean, there used to be people around, I'm not sure if there still are or not, where you can bring a crate of 20 chickens in the morning and show up with 20 bags of chicken dinner at
Yeah.
evening.
Yeah.
I don't know if that,
That is something we should talk about. What about animal processing?
Yeah, like Adam's Farm or, Blood
well,
Farm.
even, I know, farming class I took through Department of Agriculture, the person who ran it had courses on her farm on how to process chickens and so on and so forth.
Mm.
So,
To teach people how to do it, so you're not doing it improperly and, inhumanely.
So
and that would probably,
So just so we have it there, and this is a living list, I think we should toss animal processing under the review section for now,
yeah.
just to
Yeah.
make sure that it has a place to live.
Cause that can get,
and separately from educational and demonstrative tours.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the scale, right? I mean, if it's only a few animals, then
Yeah.
nobody would ever even know or
No.
question it.
Yeah.
But
But
if
if
you're
you're
talking a
doing-
big abattoir, then with the stink and the
Yeah,
blood
you're
and
doing
the
that,
disposal issues and all that.
Significant runoff and disposal issues,
Yeah, yeah.
all the
Yeah, we wanna
innards.
include that under review,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
We don't wanna not.
Well, and we're also gonna need to take, well, I'll come back to that thought in a couple minutes. Anything else that we think should get on this tonight?
Was the commercial greenhouses on here somewhere?
Yeah, commercial greenhouses are,
Cause I remember originally seeing them on,
well, commercial greenhouses as they are now are in our commercial district, I believe.
okay,
Well,
so,
wouldn't it fall into agriculture, horticulture, floriculture?
okay, so I know that after reading our current bylaws, greenhouses they're not quite, they don't put them in farms, they
Yeah.
put it as a commercial use, which restricts it to
Yeah,
the
commercial greenhouse is currently a
district.
special permit in Hubbardston. That's come up specifically because of the marijuana growers.
Well,
Oh,
but
right.
there are people that have green, like,
Yeah.
green, like, I have a neighbor that has got a
Big green, yeah, some people
Yes,
have
some
big greenhouses,
big,
yeah.
and they do, but they're agricultural, they don't like, they're not open to the public, you know what I mean, but
I
I-
do too.
yeah, so
Yeah.
should they be on here somewhere as by right, so that way it eliminates that catch-22? If somebody wants to complain, well, they're not in a commercial zone, it doesn't say it under it.
Yeah,
But it's not a commercial greenhouse.
Well, it's,
Well, I know, but if you have a commercial greenhouse, what I'm saying, as a farmer,
Right,
and you decide you wanna do a commercial greenhouse,
to sell.
yeah, to start your stuff early, so you can sell it.
No, that's a reasonable point.
Cause
Very-
it could turn into a very big argument later on if we don't kinda clarify that.
should it go as like an appendage to the language that was already there for agriculture, floriculture, you know, wherever it was here?
no, it's actually by a special permit in the existing zoning.
Yeah.
The commercial greenhouse.
I was saying like it, all that, including.
Oh,
it's
but for the
including
small-
it as necessary greenhouses to support that or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of an open question, where is the dividing line between
Yeah.
Yeah,
floriculture, horticulture, and commercial greenhouse?
Yeah.
We need to be careful with it because there are significant issues related to the cultivation of marijuana that come up with it. So we wouldn't want to just suddenly flip to commercial greenhouse by right, unless there was some kind of restriction on it, like as related to production of other crops or items on the property.
well, yeah, how about just
Or-
amending agriculture, horticulture, floriculture, and viticulture, including its associated greenhouses?
If we can avoid it, I don't think we wanna be amending the existing RA district.
Right,
Yeah, that's
That's a
true
good
too.
point, yeah.
So maybe with a special permit and it falls under one of the lesser categories for
There,
this.
there
because-
is also very likely to be a reason why that ended up in special permit in town. Do you know any of the history behind it?
I have no idea.
Because there's usually good reasons why, like random things like that in airport appear in prohibited uses.
Well, the airport was because the big huge
Yeah.
one wanted to come in. I don't know if it was put in, I'm assuming it was put in after the fact, but that's when they wanted to take our whole town and turn it into an airport. It was gonna be bigger
Really?
than Devon's, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, the state did. They wanted to make an international airport, and we were one of 3 towns that they chose.
When was that?
I was a child, so it was probably like late 80s.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember we were all, like, the whole town got together and was like, oh, hell no. And, like, me as a child was with a group of adults and other children tromping out in the woods looking for certain salamanders and, like, all kinds of weird, like, you know, invasive, native species that were, like, borderline, you know, protected or in the
Yeah.
protected, like, tromping all
Wow.
over the place looking for stuff, taking pictures and notes. And,
Vernal pools
Yes,
everywhere.
yeah, pretty much, yes. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's what finally made them say, okay, never mind, forget this.
So commercial greenhouse, yeah, I see the point you're making. Also, Mark's point, we want to be careful not opening up things that are currently in existing zoning.
Yep.
I do see the need to have some kind of clarification because I think there's a difference between a commercial greenhouse that stands on its own or a commercial greenhouse that operates in the support of other agriculture. Although that seems like that has to be defined in the state rules somewhere already.
Well, cause there's a lot of farms that they start all their,
Yeah.
you know, like their Mother's Day baskets and all this stuff all
Right.
early.
I mean,
you
it's
know,
common
order-
sense. Does
Yeah.
it need to be
it's in the
specifically
right
enumerated
farm
though? I
bylaw
mean?
already.
Yeah.
I've read that thing back and forth. I can't remember though. It's been a while since I've read it. The farm bylaw. I don't think the greenhouse is in it. The only place I remember seeing the greenhouse was it was supposed to be in the commercial zone, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
But
I mean, we
again,
can't, whatever we do, we can't step on chapter 40A.
Yeah.
Which says, you are allowed to have agriculture that's for the primary purpose of commercial agriculture, aquaculture, silviculture, horticulture, floriculture,
Yeah.
or viticulture. Which our existing zoning
Yeah.
arguably does, but
Yeah.
that's somebody else's problem, not ours. Um,
I think I'm gonna put a star on it as
Yeah,
something
good
that we
idea.
need to research a bit more.
Yeah, 'cause I would just hate to see a farm go and like, we're gonna grow all these Mother's Day and Easter and all this stuff, and they, you know, do a big huge greenhouse and somebody, it's like, oh hell no, and
Yeah.
starts tearing, you know what I mean? Like, then
Yeah.
it becomes a war.
Well, which is different from like a setup that is just greenhouses, like without another farm purpose.
True.
Like where you have like 7 or 8 large greenhouses. Like I think of, it's like a couple examples in Berlin and Bolton.
Yeah.
Of just large greenhouses.
Scale greenhouses
Yeah.
that they sell to other people and this and that, whatever.
Yeah,
right?
which is different from
Mahoney's.
like having one
That
supported.
advertises on TV.
The which?
Mahoney's,
Oh, yeah.
that's what they are.
And that's what I mean, there's a lot of them, there's a lot
It's
of,
still
Yeah.
farming,
Yeah.
but
yeah.
that's all I have.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's put a star on that as something that needs to be researched, and we need to figure out what we're gonna do with it. Cause it seems like we all wanna do something about it, but we're kinda grasping at straws to kind of figure out what the situation is in order to do something with it.
Cause growing, you know, growing flowers is still I don't know, growing flowers is farming, or starting all your seedlings, your
Sure.
tomatoes and all that
Yeah.
stuff, it's farming,
Yeah.
you're just putting them in pots.
Yeah,
It's just, I mean, the problem, I mean, if we don't put it in the by right section, if we put
Yeah.
if we put something, almost anything, in the by review section, then we'll be violating 40A,
yeah,
I think.
Okay.
okay. So let's come back to that. Anything else that we should add to that?
I think that's all I can think of at the moment.
Okay, so let's not close that item, but temporarily fold that item.
Everybody think about it,
Yeah.
just in case. If you have a mental note, write it down.
So the next one on the agenda, develop a draft list of property criteria. So let's talk about this super briefly. We need to specify what properties we want to be able to do these things. And I know that sounds like, yeah, duh. But there's gonna be a lot of nuance in that. Cause like some things that other communities have done, lots larger than 5 acres, is one. Some have done it by revenue. That sounds like it's not something that's gonna work for us. But we need to be prepared for the next meeting to come in and have a in-depth conversation about that, cause I think we've gone on enough tonight where it doesn't really make sense to go into that. But I just wanna make sure that everybody understands what the ask is for that, because that's gonna be a somewhat meaty discussion. So we need to have ideas on, well, what the lot should look like. Are there areas of the town we should include or exclude? Because we are talking about doing it as a zoning overlay map. And whether there should be a lot size restriction. There's lots of samples that are in the share drive that are, well, there's a few. The samples that exist are in the share drive.
There's almost one.
Yeah, almost.
There's not
Little
lots
tiny
of
one.
them.
Details.
There's 2 of them, and they're the only ones that exist, and they're in the share drive. But yeah, some kind of criteria, because we don't want it to just apply to, maybe we do, that's gonna be something we discuss. arguably, we don't want it to be something that applies to every parcel, and we wanna put some bumpers on, what's currently going on the parcel and what the size of the parcel is. So, we'll be talking about that at the next meeting. So, about the next meeting, 2 weeks from today,
Yes, cause we have our Board of Selectmen meeting next Monday. Right? Yes. So 16th?
does that work for everybody?
Yep.
So we're setting it for the 16th at 6:30.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about the property criteria. So everybody be ready to talk about that. If anybody has any additions to uses. And we needed to talk about third thing tonight that we said we need to talk about at that one.
Something you're gonna take before the planning board,
Oh yeah,
isn't that it?
we need to at least kick off our conversation on review process. I doubt we'll finish it that night, but we at least need to start that conversation about what our review process is gonna look like for those ones that get tracked by review. So on to matters not reasonably anticipated. Anybody have anything else they wanna add, bring up in front of the board? Committee? It's not a board, it's a committee. It's late though. And no members of the public being here, so we are gonna assume that there is no public comment at the moment. Alright, how about a motion to adjourn?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? And we are done here at 8:21.